What would you do if you found a bleeding man in a dark alley, clutching two crying babies to his chest? For 22-year-old Anna Bennett, calling the cops seemed like the obvious choice. But when the man grabbed her wrist with a grip of iron and whispered that the police were the ones who shot him, her life changed forever. She thought she was just saving a desperate father. She had no idea she had just harbored Daniel Russo, the most ruthless syndicate boss in the city. This is a story of blood, betrayal, and a love born in the darkest of shadows. Stick around, because the twists in this one will leave you breathless. The neon sign of O'Malley's Diner flickered a harsh, buzzing pink into the torrential rain of a late October night in South Boston. It was 2:15 a.m. Anna Bennett stood behind the Formica counter, her apron stained with grease and coffee, desperately trying to balance the register. Her co-worker, Sarah, had bailed an hour ago, complaining of a migraine, leaving Anna to close up the 24-hour joint alone. It was the kind of night where the rain sounded like gravel hitting the windows. The diner was completely empty, the only sound the rhythmic dripping of a leaky coffee percolator and the hum of the ancient refrigerator. Anna tied up the heavy black garbage bags from the kitchen. She hated the alley behind O'Malley's. It smelled of rotting lettuce and wet stray cats, and the single streetlight had been shot out by local kids 3 weeks ago. Pushing the heavy steel back door open with her hip, the freezing rain immediately soaked through her thin cotton blouse. She heaved the bags into the dumpster, shivering. As she turned to rush back inside, a sound froze her in her tracks. It wasn't a cat. It was a high-pitched, reedy whimper, followed by a wet, ragged cough. Anna's heart hammered against her ribs. She took a tentative step toward the deepest shadow near the grease traps. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. "Is someone there?" A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the alcove, and Anna gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. Slumped against the brick wall was a man. He was dressed in what looked like a bespoke charcoal suit, but the entire left side of his white dress shirt was soaked in a sickening, expanding stain of blackish red. His head was thrown back, his breathing a shallow, wet rattle. But that wasn't what made Anna drop to her knees in the filthy puddles. Strapped to the man's chest, secured by a heavy-duty tactical rig that looked completely out of place, was a double baby carrier. Tucked inside were two tiny infants, no more than 6 months old, bundled in thick cashmere blankets. One was silent, eyes wide and staring. The other was the source of the whimpering, its tiny face red with cold and distress. "Oh my God," Anna breathed. She reached out to check the man's pulse. Before her fingers could brush his neck, his eyes snapped open. They were a piercing, icy blue, fully alert, despite the massive blood loss. A heavy, cold steel object immediately pressed against the underside of Anna's jaw. It was a Sig Sauer P-226. "Don't," the man rasped, his voice rough like crushed glass. Anna raised her hands, shaking violently. I was just checking if you were alive. You're bleeding out. Please, let me call an ambulance." "No cops," he growled, coughing. A fleck of blood landed on his chin. "No hospitals. They'll kill them." He looked down at the twins, his hardened eyes softening for a microscopic fraction of a second. "Help me get inside." Anna's mind screamed at her to run, but she looked at the babies. Having grown up bouncing between cold foster homes in Dorchester, the sight of vulnerable children flipped a switch deep inside her. "Put the gun away," she said, her voice finding a sudden, surprising steadiness. "If you shoot me, you and your kids die in this alley." The man stared at her, assessing her in the dark. Slowly, his hand dropped, the heavy gun slipping into his coat pocket. "Daniel," he whispered, before his eyes rolled back and his dead weight pitched forward. Anna barely caught him. He was a wall of solid muscle, easily weighing over 200 pounds. Gritting her teeth, she grabbed him under the arms. It was an agonizing, muddy struggle. She dragged him inch by inch across the wet asphalt, pulling him backward through the steel door of the diner's kitchen. She kicked the door shut, slamming the deadbolt home. The diner kitchen was brightly lit with fluorescent bulbs, and the reality of the situation hit Anna full force. The floor was instantly slick with his blood. She dragged him into the dry storage pantry, the only place without windows, and eased him onto a bed of flour sacks. "Okay, Daniel," she muttered to herself, hands trembling as she grabbed a stack of clean dish towels and the diner's meager first aid kit. "Stay with me." She unclipped the tactical rig with shaking fingers. The babies started wailing in earnest as she lifted the carrier away from their father's blood-soaked chest. She placed the carrier gently onto an empty prep table, tossing her own dry cardigan over them. Returning to Daniel, she ripped his ruined shirt open. The bullet had entered his lower left abdomen. It was a clean through and through. She could feel the exit wound on his back, but he was losing blood fast. Anna had no medical training, but she had watched enough television to know she needed to apply pressure. She folded 3 dish towels, pressed them hard into the wound, and used an entire roll of heavy-duty duct tape from the utility drawer to wrap around his waist, strapping the towels tightly against the bullet holes. Daniel groaned in agony, his jaw clenching, but he didn't wake. Anna sat back on her heels, her hands coated in drying red. The diner was dead silent, save for the hum of the fridge and the frantic, hungry cries of the 2 infants. She had just harbored a gunshot victim, concealed a weapon, and locked herself in a diner with a man who could very well be a murderer. The night, she realized with a sickening drop in her stomach, had only just begun. For the next 20 minutes, Anna worked purely on adrenaline. The bleeding seemed to slow, the duct tape holding the makeshift bandages tight. Daniel's breathing leveled out, though his skin remained a terrifying shade of chalk white. The immediate crisis averted, Anna turned her attention to the prep table. The twins were screaming, their tiny fists thrashing against their blankets. Next to Daniel's unconscious body, Anna spotted a sleek, black leather duffel bag he must have dragged in with him. She unzipped it, hoping for formula. Instead, she found stacks of banded $100 bills, several burner phones, extra ammunition, and, shoved hastily in a side compartment, a Ziploc bag containing 2 baby bottles and a tin of powdered formula. Anna's breath hitched at the sight of the cash. Who is this guy? She thought, her mind racing. A bank robber? A cartel enforcer? Pushing the panic down, she took the formula to the kitchen sink. She sterilized the bottles with boiling water from the coffee machine, mixed the formula, and tested the temperature on her wrist. She walked back to the pantry and picked up the first baby, a little boy with a tuft of dark hair. He latched onto the bottle instantly, his cries quieting into rhythmic, greedy swallows. Anna rocked him gently, switching to feed the little girl next. "They're hungry," a voice rasped from the floor. Anna jumped, nearly dropping the bottle. Daniel's eyes were open, tracking her every movement. He looked weak, but the dangerous aura around him hadn't diminished. His hand was resting in his coat pocket, right where the gun was. "I found the formula in your bag," Anna said softly, stepping back but keeping the little girl cradled in her arms. "I didn't touch the other stuff." Daniel's gaze flicked to the leather duffel, then back to her. "You didn't call the cops. You told me not to, and I figured whoever shot you might be listening to the scanners." A faint, grim smile touched Daniel's pale lips. "Smart girl? What's your name?" "Anna." "Listen to me, Anna," Daniel said, struggling to prop himself up against the shelves. He winced, a sharp hiss escaping his teeth. "You need to wipe up the blood in the kitchen. Use bleach. If anyone comes to those doors, you act perfectly normal." "Who is coming?" Anna asked, fear spiking in her chest again. "Who did this to you?" Before Daniel could answer, the diner's front windows lit up with the sweeping, blinding beams of headlights. Anna froze. The little girl in her arms cooed happily. Daniel's eyes widened. "Get down," he hissed, "and keep them quiet." Anna gently placed the baby back into the carrier with her brother, handing them both their half-empty bottles to keep them occupied. She crept out of the pantry, crawling on her hands and knees behind the front counter. Peeking over the lip of the pie display case, her blood ran cold. An unmarked black Ford Explorer was idling in the pouring rain, right by the front entrance. The driver's side window rolled down, and a heavy-set man in a trench coat stepped out, holding a heavy mag light. Anna recognized him instantly. Detective Hayes. He was a regular at O'Malley's, known for harassing the waitresses and never paying for his coffee. But the rumors around the neighborhood painted a much darker picture. He was known to be on the payroll of the local syndicates, a fixer who cleaned up messes for the highest bidder. Hayes pressed his face against the glass of the locked front door, shining his flashlight inside. The beam swept over the booths, the empty stools, and lingered on the swinging doors of the kitchen. Anna's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. If Hayes saw the trail of blood she hadn't had time to mop up. She made a split-second decision. Standing up from behind the counter, she grabbed a rag and a bottle of Windex, feigning a startled jump as the flashlight hit her face. She walked to the door, unlocking it just an inch. "Detective Hayes, you scared half to death. We're closed." Hayes pushed against the glass, but Anna held the door firm with her foot. He sneered, rain dripping from his nose. "Little late for you to be here alone, Anna. Where's Sarah?" "Sick," Anna lied smoothly, though her hands gripped the Windex bottle tight enough to crack the plastic. "I'm just finishing the floors. Everything okay out here?" Hayes narrowed his eyes, trying to peer past her shoulder, looking for a guy. Might be hurt. Tall, dark suit. "You see anyone wandering around the alley?" "Just the usual raccoons," Anna said, forcing a tired, annoyed laugh. "Honestly, detective, if a bleeding guy came knocking, I'd have hit the panic button under the register by now." Hayes stared at her for a long, suffocating moment. The silence was broken only by the rain. Finally, he grunted. "Keep the doors locked, sweetheart. It's a bad night to be playing hero." "Always do," she said. She locked the deadbolt as he walked back to his SUV. She waited until the taillights disappeared down Dorchester Avenue before her knees buckled. She slid down the front of the door, burying her face in her hands, taking shaky, gasping breaths. When she finally pulled herself together and walked back into the pantry, Daniel was watching her. The gun was out of his pocket now, resting on his knee, but his finger wasn't on the trigger. "Hayes," Daniel said, his voice flat and deadly. "He's on Silvio's payroll." "Who is Silvio?" Anna asked, leaning against the doorframe, suddenly utterly exhausted. Daniel looked down at his sleeping twins. "Silvio is the man who killed my wife 3 hours ago," he said, the raw grief in his voice chilling the room. "He's my underboss, and he won't stop until he finishes the job." He looked up at Anna, his icy blue eyes locking onto hers. "You just lied to a dirty cop for a man you don't know. Why?" Anna looked at the sleeping babies, then back to the bleeding, dangerous man in front of her. "Because you're a father, and I couldn't let them be orphans." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You're in it now, Anna. They'll check the alley. They'll see my blood leading to your door. We have to leave right now." The diner's humming refrigerator suddenly felt deafening in the heavy metallic silence that followed Daniel's declaration. "We have to leave right now." The words hung in the air, a terrifying reality that Anna's exhausted brain struggled to process. "Leave?" Anna whispered, her eyes darting frantically around the cramped pantry. "I can't just leave. My apartment, my life. If I disappear, they'll think I did something wrong. The police you just lied to, are owned by the man trying to slaughter my children." Daniel cut in, his voice a harsh, breathless rasp. He leaned his head back against the flour sacks, his face slick with a cold sweat. "Hayes will run your plates. He'll check the alley cameras if he hasn't already. If he finds a single drop of my blood leading to this door, you're a dead woman, Anna. Silvio doesn't leave loose ends. And right now, you are the biggest loose end in Boston." Anna stared at her blood-stained hands, the reality of her choices crashing down on her. She was a 22-year-old orphan who struggled to pay rent on a basement studio. She had nothing, but it was hers. Yet as she looked at the two tiny, innocent faces sleeping peacefully in the carrier, she knew she couldn't hand them over to a firing squad. "Okay," she breathed, her voice shaking but resolute. "Okay, what do we do?" Daniel reached into the leather duffel bag with trembling, blood-slicked fingers and pulled out one of the burner phones. He punched in a short sequence of numbers and pressed the phone to his ear. "Declan," Daniel said, his tone instantly shifting from a wounded man to a commanding authority. "I'm compromised. South Boston, O'Malley's Diner. I took her through and through to the abdomen. I have the twins. Silvio initiated a hostile takeover. Isabella is gone." There was a pause, and though Anna couldn't hear the voice on the other end, she saw the microscopic tightening of Daniel's jaw. "Bring the armored transport to the loading dock in 5 minutes, Daniel ordered, "and send a cleaning crew to the alley. Erase everything. We are taking the girl with us." He dropped the phone and looked up at Anna. "Grab anything you need from your locker. We have 300 seconds before my men get here, and I cannot walk." Anna didn't argue. She bolted from the pantry, sprinting to the cramped staff break room. She shoved her keys, her cheap cell phone, and her worn winter coat into a canvas tote bag. She took a passing glance in the mirror. Her face was pale, her apron smeared with red. She ripped the apron off, throwing it into the trash, and ran back to the kitchen. Daniel was struggling to sit upright, his face twisted in pure agony as the duct tape bandages strained against his wound. "Don't move," Anna scolded, rushing over. She grabbed the heavy tactical baby carrier and strapped it over her own chest, adjusting the straps until the twins were secure against her. Their combined weight was startling, but she planted her feet, ignoring the strain in her back. "I'll help you." She hauled Daniel up by his uninjured right arm, throwing his heavy arm over her shoulder. He leaned heavily against her, his breath hot and ragged against her neck. Together they staggered towards the heavy steel back door. Just as Anna reached for the deadbolt, the sound of squealing tires echoed from the alleyway, followed by the crunch of a heavy vehicle slamming into the metal dumpster. Anna froze, her hand hovering over the lock. "Is that Declan?" Daniel's body went rigid against hers. He drew the Sig Sauer with blinding speed, leveling it at the heavy steel door. "Stand behind me." "You can barely stand," Anna hissed, dragging him back a step. 3 heavy rhythmic knocks struck the metal door. Knock, pause, knock, knock. Daniel exhaled a shuddering breath and lowered the weapon. "It's him. Open it." Anna threw the deadbolt and yanked the door open. The freezing rain immediately whipped into the kitchen, but Anna's eyes were locked on the massive, matte black, heavily armored SUV idling aggressively in the narrow alley. A man stepped out into the downpour. He was towering, dressed in a sharp black suit that seemed impervious to the rain, with a face that looked like it had been chiseled from granite. This was Declan. His eyes swept over the scene. The blood, the terrified waitress, the babies on her chest, and finally, his bleeding boss. "Boss," Declan said, his voice a low rumble over the storm. He didn't waste another second. He stepped forward, easily taking Daniel's weight from Anna, practically carrying the larger man towards the SUV. "Get in the back, sweetheart," another man called out. He had materialized from the shadows, carrying a spray tank of industrial bleach and a heavy-duty mop. The cleaners were already here. Anna scrambled into the back seat of the SUV, the leather interior smelling strongly of expensive cologne and gun oil. Declan hoisted Daniel into the seat beside her before slamming the heavy armored door shut, plunging them into the dark, climate-controlled cabin. Declan jumped into the driver's seat and threw the vehicle into drive. "Silvio's men are sweeping the perimeter," Declan reported, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. "We intercepted police chatter. Hayes called in a tip about a disturbance here." "Drive," Daniel growled, his head lolling back against the leather headrest. "Take us to Aris." The SUV surged forward, tearing out of the alley just as 2 sleek, dark sedans turned the corner at the far end of the street. "Hold on," Declan warned calmly. He slammed his foot on the gas, the heavy vehicle roaring like a beast as it blew through a red light, violently swerving to avoid a late-night delivery truck. Anna gasped, wrapping her arms protectively over the twins as the SUV fishtailed on the wet asphalt. Gunfire suddenly popped in the distance, sharp cracking sounds that made Anna squeeze her eyes shut. Thwack, thwack! 2 heavy impacts struck the rear window, but the reinforced glass didn't even spiderweb. Declan took a sharp, blindingly fast right turn into a subterranean parking garage, navigating the spiraling concrete ramp at a terrifying speed before slamming on the brakes in a completely dark corner of the lowest level. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing and the soft, sleepy sighs of the twins against Anna's chest. "We're clear," Declan announced quietly, throwing the SUV into park. "Dr. Aris is ready." Anna looked down at her shaking hands, then over at Daniel, whose eyes were closed, his face terrifyingly still. She had just crossed a line into a world of bullets, blood, and shadows. There was no going back to O'Malley's diner. The clinic was actually a multi-million-dollar luxury penthouse, heavily retrofitted with state-of-the-art medical equipment, hidden entirely behind the facade of an abandoned textile factory in the Seaport district. Dr. Aris, an older man with kind eyes and extremely steady hands, didn't ask a single question as Declan carried Daniel into the sterile, brightly lit operating room. Anna was firmly guided into an adjacent sitting room by a stoic guard. For the next 3 hours, Anna sat on a plush velvet sofa, entirely numb. She had managed to unstrap the twins, laying them gently in the center of a massive king-sized bed in the adjoining suite. They were incredibly good babies, completely unaware of the violent storm raging around them. She sat beside them, watching their little chests rise and fall, her mind a chaotic whirlwind. Who was this man? She knew he was a criminal, a mafia boss, by his own admission, but the way he had shielded his children, the sheer, unrelenting force of his will to keep them alive, it conflicted with every terrible thing she knew about his world. Anna knew what it meant to be discarded. She had been thrown away by her own parents, left to the harsh mercies of the foster system. Seeing a man bleed half to death for his kids struck a deep, agonizing chord in her heart. The heavy oak door creaked open, breaking her from her thoughts. Declan stepped in, his expression unreadable. "He's awake," Declan said softly. "He's asking for you. And the kids." Anna carefully gathered the twins, one in each arm, and followed Declan down the hallway. Daniel was propped up in a hospital bed, an IV line snaking into his arm. His chest was bare and heavily bandaged, his skin still alarmingly pale, but his eyes were sharp and focused. As Anna walked in, his gaze immediately dropped to the bundles in her arms, and the hardened, ruthless boss melted away for a fleeting second, replaced by a grieving, terrified father. "Bring them here," he rasped. Anna stepped forward, gently laying the babies on the mattress beside him. Daniel reached out with his right hand, his scarred knuckles softly brushing against the little boy's cheek. "Leo," Daniel whispered. He moved his hand to the little girl. "Mia." Anna stood awkwardly by the bed, feeling like an intruder in an intensely private moment. "They're beautiful," she said quietly. Daniel looked up at her, his icy blue eyes locking onto hers. "Silvio poisoned Isabella at a charity gala tonight. Tasteless, odorless neurotoxin. She collapsed in my arms." His voice was hollow, stripped of emotion because the alternative was complete devastation. "While I was rushing her to the hospital, his hitmen ambushed my convoy. They intended to wipe out my entire bloodline tonight, to take the syndicate without contest." Anna gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. "That's monstrous." "That is my world," Daniel said coldly. "And now, unfortunately, it is yours. Hayes saw your face. He knows you lied. Silvio will realize you helped me, and he will tear Boston apart to find you and make an example out of you." "So what do we do?" Anna asked, the fear returning, cold and sharp. "We can't just hide in a penthouse forever." "We aren't staying in Boston. We aren't even staying in the country," Daniel replied, wincing as he shifted his weight. He looked past her to Declan, who was standing by the door, Is the transport ready? The jet is fueled and waiting at the private airstrip, boss, Declan confirmed. Flight plan is logged as a corporate retreat. Where are we going? Anna asked, her pulse quickening. Europe? The Caribbean? Daniel shook his head. Silvio has connections in Europe. He can bribe officials in the islands. I need a place where his money means nothing, and his men will freeze before they even reach the front gate. He looked back at Anna, his gaze intense. Have you ever heard of Yakutia? Anna frowned, searching her memory. In Siberia, isn't that one of the coldest places on Earth? It is, Daniel confirmed. I own a massive, off-the-grid estate deep in the taiga. It is completely self-sustaining, heavily fortified, and virtually inaccessible unless you know the exact coordinates. The locals are loyal to me, and the environment itself is a fortress of ice. He reached out, his warm, rough fingers gently wrapping around Anna's trembling wrist. The sudden contact sent a jolt of unexpected electricity up her arm. I have to leave Boston to draw Silvio out and plan my retaliation, Daniel continued, his voice dropping to a low, intimate timbre. I am going to bring the sky down on his head. I am going to deliver a reckoning so brutal that the remaining families will speak of it in whispers for a century. But I cannot do that while I am constantly looking over my shoulder, terrified for Leo and Mia. He squeezed her wrist gently. I need you, Anna. You saved their lives tonight. They are comfortable with you. I need someone pure, someone outside of this poisoned life, to watch over them in the ice while I orchestrate a war. Anna stared at him, her breath catching in her throat. He was asking an orphaned waitress to fly across the world to the frozen ends of the earth to play mother to a mafia boss's heirs. It was insanity. But as she looked at Daniel's desperate, pleading eyes, and then down at the two innocent babies who had already lost their mother, her underdog spirit, the part of her that always fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves, roared to life. Okay, Anna said, her voice steadying. I'll go to Yakutia, but on one condition. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Name it. When the war is over, Anna said, her eyes flashing with a fierce, protective light. You make sure Silvio suffers for what he did to their mother. I want justice for them. A dark, terrifying smile spread across Daniel's face, the smile of a predator that had just found its teeth again. Oh, little bird, he whispered. Karma is going to be the least of his problems. Boss, Declan interrupted suddenly, tapping his earpiece, his face draining of color. We have a problem. One of Aris's nurses. She just slipped out the back service elevator. The perimeter guards found a scrambled burner phone in the locker room. She sent a text 2 minutes ago. Daniel's eyes hardened into chips of blue ice. What did it say? Declan swallowed hard. It said, "The wolf is in the cage. Send the hunters." The trap hadn't been avoided. It had just moved to the penthouse. The silence of the penthouse was shattered not by a scream, but by the rhythmic, mechanical thud-thud-thud of a helicopter hovering dangerously close to the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Get down!" Daniel roared, dragging himself from the bed with a guttural growl of pain. He didn't reach for his IV. He ripped it out, blood spraying onto the white linens as he lunged for the Sig Sauer on the nightstand. Anna didn't wait for a second command. She scooped Leo and Mia from the bed, shielding their tiny bodies with her own as she dove behind a heavy mahogany dresser. A second later, the world turned into a whirlwind of flying glass. The massive windows exploded inward. Flashbang grenades skittered across the hardwood floor, detonating in blinding bursts of white light and ear-splitting cracks. Anna squeezed her eyes shut, pressing the babies to her chest, whispering prayers she hadn't said since she was a child in a foster home on Savin Hill Avenue. Through the ringings in her ears, she heard the chatter of submachine guns. "Declan! West flank!" Daniel's voice was a pillar of ice in the chaos. Despite his gut wound, he was a wraith of violence, firing with surgical precision at the dark figures rappelling from the helicopter. Silas Reed, Silvio's most feared cleaner, was the first through the breach. He was a man with a jagged scar running from his ear to his chin, his eyes devoid of anything resembling humanity. He didn't go for Daniel. He looked straight at the dresser where Anna was hiding. "The bloodline ends today," Silas bellowed, his voice carrying over the roar of the wind, whipping through the shattered room. Declan intercepted him, the two men colliding with the force of two freight trains. It was a brutal, cinematic display of hand-to-hand combat, the sound of breaking bone and wet thuds echoing over the gunfire. Daniel crawled toward Anna, his face a mask of agony and fury. "The service elevator," he choked out, grasping her shoulder. "There's a reinforced steel hatch in the floor of the closet. Get in, now!" "I'm not leaving you," Anna cried, her voice cracking as she saw the fresh blood soaking through his bandages. "You are the only thing keeping them alive," Daniel snarled, his eyes burning with a desperate, terrifying love. "If you stay, we all die. Go!" He shoved her towards the walk-in closet. Anna scrambled inside, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She found the latch, a heavy hidden ring in the floor, and yanked it up. It revealed a narrow, carpeted chute leading to the floor below. She didn't look back. She slid down with the twins, the descent ending in a small, windowless room filled with surveillance monitors and weapons racks. A moment later, Daniel tumbled down after her, followed by a blood-spattered Declan. "Is everyone okay?" Anna gasped, checking the babies. They were crying now, their high-pitched wails filling the small room, but they were unhurt. "We have 2 minutes before they breach the lower level," Declan said, his breathing heavy. He grabbed a heavy-duty tactical vest and threw it to Anna. "Put this on. It's small, but it'll cover the babies." They moved through a hidden corridor that led to the building's underground garage. A nondescript silver sedan was waiting, its engine already humming. "Where's the jet?" Daniel asked, his voice fading as the adrenaline began to wear off. "Logan International, signature flight support," Declan replied, throwing the car into gear. "We have a window of 6 minutes before the FAA grounds everything due to the atmospheric disturbance Silvio's friends are cooking up at the tower." As they tore out of the garage, Anna looked back. The top floor of the penthouse was engulfed in flames, a funeral pyre for the life she used to know. She looked at Daniel, who had slumped into the passenger seat, his hand still gripping his pistol. "You're a monster," she whispered, the shock finally setting in. Daniel didn't look at her. He just stared at the road ahead. "I am the monster who keeps the other monsters away from those children, Anna. Never forget that." They reached the tarmac, just as the first blue and white lights of the Boston police surged toward the airport perimeter. Declan didn't slow down. He drove straight through a chain-link fence, the sedan screaming toward a sleek, white Gulfstream jet with its stairs already down and turbines whining. They scrambled aboard as bullets began to ping off the asphalt around them. The heavy door hissed shut, and the jet began its taxi before they were even in their seats. As the plane tilted upward, leaving the lights of Boston behind, Anna felt the crushing weight of the unknown. She was on a private jet with a dying mafia kingpin, 2 orphans, and a mountain of cash, heading for the most desolate place on the planet. The drama of the night was over, but the twist was just beginning. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that she didn't want to be anywhere else. The flight took nearly 14 hours, a grueling journey across the North Pole. Daniel spent most of it in a medically induced sleep. Dr. Aris, who had somehow made it to the jet in the confusion, working frantically to re-stitch his internal organs in the cramped cabin. Anna sat in the back, the twins tucked into a custom-built bassinet. She watched the sun rise and set over the endless white expanse of the Arctic Circle. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Silas Reed's scarred face and the flash of muzzle flares. "We're crossing the Verkhoyansk range," Declan announced, stepping back into the cabin. He looked exhausted, his suit jacket gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal thick, corded muscles covered in tattoos of Celtic knots. "It's minus 45 degrees Celsius down there. If the engines fail, we're dead in 10 minutes. Comforting. Anna muttered, rocking Leo. The Vostok estate is just ahead, Declan continued, ignoring her sarcasm. It was built by a Russian oligarch who owed Daniel a life debt. It's more of a bunker than a house. Triple-paned glass, geothermal heating, and a security system that can detect a rabbit's heartbeat from a mile away. The jet began its descent into Yakutsk, the coldest city in the world. When the wheels hit the frozen runway, the vibration shook Anna to her core. The door opened, and a blast of air so cold it felt like liquid nitrogen rushed into the cabin. It was a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. Waiting on the tarmac were 3 massive, white Kamaz trucks, beasts of machinery designed for the Siberian wilderness. A group of men in heavy, fur-lined parkas stood guard, their faces obscured by goggles and masks. "Welcome to the end of the world," Daniel's voice came from the medical bed. He was awake, his face gaunt, but his eyes burning with a renewed, predatory light. They were loaded into the trucks for a 6-hour drive through the taiga, a forest of skeletal, snow-covered larch trees that seemed to go on forever. The road was nothing more than a track of packed ice. Finally, the ice fortress appeared. It was a masterpiece of brutalist architecture, a sprawling structure of grey stone and reinforced glass perched on the edge of a frozen cliff overlooking the Lena River. High walls topped with thermal cameras surrounded the perimeter. Inside, however, was a different world. The great hall was lined with warm cedar wood and heated by a massive stone fireplace that could have roasted an ox. Thick Persian rugs covered the floors, and the air smelled of pine and expensive cognac. "This is your home now, Anna," Daniel said, as Declan helped him into a wheelchair. "The staff here, Yuri and Oksana, speak English. They will provide whatever you or the children need. You are safe here. No one gets into Yakutia without my permission." As the days turned into weeks, a strange domestic rhythm settled over the fortress. Anna took over the nursery, a sun-drenched room filled with the best toys and clothes money could buy. She walked the babies through the vast, heated indoor gardens, showing them exotic flowers that bloomed while a blizzard raged outside the glass walls. Daniel's recovery was slow but steady. He spent his days in a high-tech war room, surrounded by monitors showing real-time feeds from Boston. Anna would often see him through the glass partitions, his face illuminated by the blue light of the screens, his fingers flying over a keyboard as he moved assets, liquidated Silvio's fronts, and tightened the noose around his enemy from 6,000 miles away. One evening, Anna was sitting by the fire, Mia asleep on her shoulder, when Daniel wheeled himself into the room. He looked different, stronger, though his eyes were still shadowed by grief for his late wife, Isabella. "I found him," Daniel said quietly, staring into the flames. Anna looked up. "Silvio?" "He's hiding in a safe house in Revere. He thinks he's won. He's already started reaching out to the commission in New York to be recognized as the new head of the Russo family." A cold, sharp smile touched Daniel's lips. "He doesn't know that I've already bought his bodyguards. He doesn't know that every cent he thinks he has is currently being funneled into a black hole account in the Cayman Islands." "What are you going to do?" Anna asked, her heart racing. "Karma is a patient mistress, Anna," Daniel said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm not going to kill him. Not yet. I'm going to let him watch as everything he ever built turns to ash. I'm going to make him beg for the death I gave his hitmen." He looked at her then, and for the first time, the distance between them vanished. The mafia boss and the waitress, the protector and the saved. "Why did you really bring me here, Daniel?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You could have hired 100 nannies with military training." Daniel stayed silent for a long time, the only sound the crackling of the logs in the hearth. "Because you didn't look at the money in the bag," he finally said, "and because when Silas Reed came through that window, you didn't run. You covered my children with your own body. In my world, loyalty is bought. In yours, it's just who you are. I needed that light in this frozen dark." He reached out, taking her hand. His skin was warm, his grip firm. Anna knew she should pull away. She knew she was falling for a man who dealt in death. But in the middle of a Siberian winter, with the world's most dangerous man promising her safety, she felt a heat that had nothing to do with the fire. "I'm not a light, Daniel," she whispered. "I'm just a girl from O'Malley's." "Not anymore," he replied, leaning closer until their foreheads touched. "You are the queen of the ice now." The twist? The waitress hadn't just saved the boss. She had become his only weakness and his greatest strength. The departure was silent. Daniel didn't say goodbye with words. He did it with a look that promised he would either return as a king or not at all. He left the Vostok estate under the cover of a whiteout blizzard, accompanied only by Declan and a small elite strike team. Anna was left in the silent, echoing halls of the fortress with the twins, the housekeeper Oksana, and the head of security, a hulking, quiet man named Yuri. For 3 days, the world was nothing but the howling wind and the crackle of the fireplace. Then the silence broke. It started with the monitors. Anna was in the nursery, rocking Leo, when she noticed the perimeter cameras in the hallway flickering to black. Her heart skipped a beat. She set the baby down and walked toward the security station in the great hall. "Yuri!" she called out. The large man was standing by the console, his back to her. "The cameras are going out. Is it the storm?" Yuri didn't turn around. "The storm is the perfect cover, Anna," he said, his voice devoid of its usual professional warmth. When he finally turned, he wasn't holding a tablet. He was holding a suppressed pistol. "Silvio is a very wealthy man. Even in exile, he has enough to buy a man's soul." Anna felt the blood drain from her face. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. "Daniel trusted you." "Daniel is a dead man walking in Boston," Yuri countered, stepping toward her. "Silvio doesn't just want the Russo name. He wants the bloodline. Give me the children and I'll let you walk out into the snow. You might survive 10 minutes. It's better than what Silvio has planned for you." But Yuri had made one mistake. He had underestimated the waitress from O'Malley's. He saw a victim. He didn't see the woman who had survived the foster system and a night of gunfire in a Boston alley. "You're right about one thing, Yuri," Anna said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as she backed towards the kitchen island. "The storm is the perfect cover." She didn't run for the door. She grabbed the heavy cast-iron skillet from the counter and swung it with every ounce of her underdog fury, catching Yuri across the jaw before he could level the gun. As he stumbled, she didn't stop. She remembered the security override code Daniel had whispered to her on their last night. She lunged for the console, her fingers flying across the keys. 7249 Alpha. The fortress didn't just have cameras, it had a containment mode. Heavy steel shutters slammed down over every window and door in the great hall, locking Yuri inside the main room, and locking Anna in the nursery wing with the children. "You bitch!" Yuri roared, throwing his weight against the reinforced glass partition. "I'm not a waitress anymore, Yuri," Anna yelled back through the intercom, her hands trembling but her eyes hard. "I'm the one holding the keys. Underscore, 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 underscore." Thousands of miles away, in a rain-slicked warehouse near the Boston harbor, a different kind of justice was being served. Silvio sat at a mahogany table, flanked by Detective Hayes and 2 of his top enforcers, Miller and Ross. They were celebrating. Silvio had just received a text from Yuri. "The assets are secured. The girl is handled." "To the new king of Boston," Hayes said, raising a glass of expensive scotch. "To legacy," Silvio grinned, the scar on his face twisting into a grotesque mask. The heavy steel doors of the warehouse suddenly groaned. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into a suffocating darkness. "Miller, Ross, get the lights," Silvio snapped. But the only response so soon was the sound of a heavy body hitting the floor. Then a voice emerged from the shadows. a voice Silvio thought had been buried in the Siberian ice. "Did you really think I'd leave my children's lives in the hands of a man who could be bought, Silvio?" Daniel stepped into the beam of a single emergency light. He looked like a ghost, his face pale but his eyes burning with the hard karma he had promised. He wasn't alone. Declan was at his side, and behind them stood a dozen men Silvio recognized, his own private guard. "Miller? Ross?" Silvio stammered, looking at his enforcers. They didn't move. They didn't draw their weapons. "I didn't just buy them back, Silvio," Daniel said, walking slowly towards the table. "I showed them the ledger. I showed them how you skimmed from their pensions, how you set up Miller's brother to take the fall for that warehouse heist in Revere last year. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed the family." Silvio reached for the gun tucked into his waistband, but a shot rang out from the rafters. The gun flew from his hand as a bullet shattered his wrist. Silvio screamed, collapsing to his knees. Daniel stood over him, looking down with cold, clinical detachment. "You killed Isabella for power," Daniel said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. "You tried to kill my children for greed. In my world, we don't call the police. We call for a reckoning." Daniel didn't pull the trigger. He didn't have to. He stepped back, nodding to the men who had once served Silvio. "He's all yours, boys," Daniel said. "Justice is a debt that must be paid in full." As Daniel walked out of the warehouse, the screams of the man who thought he was a king echoed against the corrugated metal walls. It was the sound of a man realizing that karma isn't a whisper. It's a landslide. Underscore, 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 underscore. 2 days later, the shutters of the Vostok estate rose. Anna stood on the helipad, the twins bundled in her arms, as a familiar black helicopter descended through the thinning clouds. The door opened, and Daniel stepped out. He looked tired, his shoulder bandaged. But when he saw her, the hardness in his face vanished. He walked to her, ignoring the cold, and wrapped his arms around her and the babies. "Yuri?" Daniel asked. "He's in the sub-level holding cell," Anna said, leaning her head against his chest. "I think he's ready to talk." Daniel pulled back, looking at her with a mix of awe and something much deeper. "I told you that you were the queen of the ice. I didn't realize you were a warrior, too." "I did what I had to do for them," she said, looking down at Leo and Mia. "For us." Daniel took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, the waitress and the boss. They were worlds apart, born of different blood and different shadows. But in the heart of the Siberian wilderness, they had found the only thing that was real. "The war is over, Anna," Daniel whispered, kissing her forehead. "Let's go home." "Where is home?" she asked. Daniel looked at the fortress, then at the vast, beautiful world beyond the ice, wherever the four of us are. As they walked back into the warmth of the estate, the sun finally broke through the Siberian clouds, reflecting off the snow like 1,000,000 diamonds. The waitress had found a man shot in an alley, and in saving him, she had saved herself. That was the incredible journey of Anna and Daniel, a story that proves love and loyalty can be found in the darkest of places. From a greasy diner in South Boston to the frozen fortresses of Siberia, they faced betrayal and bullets to protect what mattered most. It wasn't just a mafia drama. It was a testament to the power of an underdog who refused to back down when the world tried to take everything away. Justice was served, and a new family was forged in the fire of hard karma. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves a good twist. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next real-life dramatic storytelling. What would you have done in Anna's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.